The Reformed Gamers is brought to you 100% independent and ad-free thanks to our dear patrons over on patreon.com/thereformedgamers. To get yourself sweet perks such as early access to all of our episodes, special episodes of the podcast, and more, head over to patreon.com/thereformedgamers today and consider lending support to the show. Without further ado, let's hop into the show. Hello and welcome, dear listeners, to episode 141 of The Reformed Gamers, the show all about theology, video games, playing around with soundboards, and all that other stuff. I am your host, Logan. And guys, because Adam's not here scheduling conflicts and all that stuff, so I've got some guys helping me out here. Guys, go ahead and introduce yourselves to the dear listeners. I guess not all at once.
I am Micah Hendrick.
And I am Jonathan Steele. I believe I've been on the show. Well, I don't believe. I have been on the show in the past. So I don't remember me, but
It's like, I think I've been here before. I don't remember. It's been so long. But no, yeah, you guys remember Micah from our VR Bros episode and Jonathan from our Breath of the Wild episode. And there was didn't we do a Nintendo Switch episode, like State of Nintendo Switch, where you came on?
Probably.
I feel like that was it.
Probably. I've done a handful.
I don't remember. I mean, you're our resident Nintendo dude, so it's like we just bring you on to talk about anything and everything Nintendo. Which, speaking of Nintendo, if you guys haven't noticed from the title of the episode, or the show notes, or anything like that, maybe you're you're a listener who just ignores that stuff, and that's fine. We're going to be talking about our favorite video game consoles this episode, not PC, because PC gamers are nerds. And we don't support PC. I'm just messing. I like to mess with people. Minesweeper? Where's the thing? There it is. Got him. All right.
We're got no timing there.
Oh, man. I feel like ever since we got this soundboard thing, the show's gotten a little more off rails, and it's going to continue to devolve into this pile of junk food style podcasting, but I don't know.
It's all
We'll
good.
see. We'll see.
Yeah.
But that being said, thank you guys for supporting us on Patreon. If you guys would like to support us on Patreon, patreon.com/thereformedgamers. A little bit of housekeeping before we get on the show. Our review of Power Rangers Battle for the Grid is up over on the website, thereformedgamers.com, written by our resident Power Rangers encyclopedia / executive producer of the show, Wesley Wright. He wrote up a sweet article over there on the website about the game. Doesn't cover the story mode that just got patched in over this past week, but that might be coming a little bit later on. And hopefully by the time that you're listening to this, when this releases to public feeds, the third boss fight for Fury should be live on our YouTube. If it isn't, I don't know what to tell you. I'm trying to get it out there, and if it's not up there, then I guess it's just not up there. So we'll just see when we can get that up there. Needless to say, just go subscribe to us on YouTube. Hit the bell icon, because YouTube apparently likes to unsubscribe people. I don't know. I feel like I'm rambling at this point. So let's just get into the show. Without further ado, a little bit of what we've been playing. Micah, you go first then.
I've been playing a couple of Bandai Namco games, which is shocking to me. I never would have thought that, but past couple of months, the first game I picked up was Ace Combat 7. Which is I wouldn't say a flight sim. It's not really a sim. It's pretty arcadey and really approachable, but it's just a, F-16 sort of stuff. You get in the cockpit and you do some dogfighting. And this particular one is kind of a bit of a throwback. They've had a couple of not so good games in recent years, but this one kind of goes back to the PS2 days where they had Ace Combat 4 and 5, a couple of really good ones where the fiction and narrative is really kind of driving everything and really good. But they put a lot of care into this one, a lot of attention into this one, really to make it kind of a AAA package as far as the campaign, the multiplayer, the level of like fidelity as far as graphics and all the voice acting and stuff like that is just top notch. So this game is just a lot of fun. The mission variation is really good as far as, sometimes you're, dogfighting in the air with some cool drones, or you're doing some stealth missions through canyons trying to avoid floodlights and these sort of things. So Ace Combat's really good. One reason I got it as well is because it has a couple of VR missions that you can do.
Ooh.
It doesn't have the whole game in VR, but it has a handful of missions you can do with PSVR. So I picked that up and put on the headset, and that is excellent.
So can you
Didn't
like
really get
can you
motion
like see a
sickness or anything.
fully realized cockpit when you do that? Like look around the cockpit?
Basically, yeah, it's really neat because
Sweet.
in the VR mode, they force you to do in the cockpit. You can't do the third person perspective, and
Mhm.
so if you're trying to, if you're tailing an enemy, and or maybe he like goes perpendicular to you, and you kind of have to follow him. You can follow him with your head and snap your head around instead of pulling the stick up or whatever.
Dude,
So you can
cool.
sort of do a better job of keeping track of where they go. So it's really immersive in that regard. Really cool. So that's recommended. It's I think it just dropped in price. It's on sale now. You can get it for about 30 or 40 bucks, I think. But that's
Now is Ace Combat hard? Because I've heard stories that this game is very like it has a pretty steep learning curve. Is that true of 7
it's
or
not
not?
easy, but it's not overly difficult or anything like that. It's got easy, normal, hard difficulty settings at the beginning. But yeah, I played on normal and I failed on several missions for sure. I had to do about 5, 6, 7 missions, a handful of times potentially. But so there's a decent challenge to it, but it's not anything like Dark Souls
It's not
hard or
anything
anything like
like
that.
Dark Souls.
Right.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, been playing that. The second Bandai Namco game I picked up on sale. It's a little bit older. Got it at GameStop for $10 recently. Ni no Kuni 2.
Mm.
So was
That's Adam's
feeling
one of Adam's
some.
favorites there.
Yeah, I know he loves it. I was feeling some JRPG vibes, so I picked that up, popped it in, and Level 5's at it again. They did the first game, which I was a big fan of, mainly because Studio Ghibli did the art for the first game,
Hmm.
and they didn't do the art
Yeah.
for this game, but it is a similar art style, and it's still beautiful. Um,
Wow, really?
yeah, they didn't do it honestly, but it's hard to
Wow, looks
tell.
just like it.
Yeah, it looks really, really good regardless. I'm not sure who did the art. I couldn't tell you honestly, but at any rate, I've put about 12 or 13 hours into that game. I just got to the part where you start doing some kingdom building and that sort of stuff. So I'm
Yeah.
just kind of getting into that, which is good so far, and really, I'm liking it more than I thought I was going to. I kind of had tempered expectations going in, but the story and the scenarios that the characters all find themselves in is really driving me forward. I'm kind of a story driven guy. Like if there's a good hook narratively, I'm probably gonna get into the game. So that's very good here, really engaging. Of course, a big open world to explore. The combat is easy. I'm playing on normal, and they added 2 harder difficulty settings post game release, and I'm probably going to bump it up because you get better loot. Um, but um, but yeah, it's real satisfying. Kind of maybe a notch more complicated than say Kingdom Hearts combat. It's not really a whole lot to it, but it's fun and engaging as well. So yeah, Ace Combat 7, Ni no Kuni 2. That's what I've been playing.
Yeah, the
Cool.
thing about Ni no Kuni 2 that kind of bothered me was that like the combat was just super simple for me and not I shouldn't say simple. Like it was just really easy. Kind of reminded me of Tales of Vesperia in that way. I didn't even think about raising the difficulty. Maybe that's what I should have done.
Yeah, I haven't done it yet, but I'm about to. I think it can turn into just just mash and square over and over and
Yeah,
over again.
that's pretty much
There's
what
the
I did.
light attack on square, and there's the heavy attack on triangle, and there's some magic and some projectiles and stuff. But more or less, that's it. Um,
I thought Ni no Kuni 2 had turn-based combat. Is that not true?
No, dude.
no, it's you run
Oh.
around and whack away at them. Yeah.
Oh, I don't know how I got that idea. Maybe because it was a
Didn't
JRPG,
the
I just assumed.
wa- was the first game turn based?
I don't believe so. No, I think it was real similar
Huh, I don't know how
Huh.
I got that
mechanic-wise.
in my head.
I think.
So you can just like it's fluid in and out of battle like any kind of open world action RPG where you just kind of
Yeah,
run
like if
through.
you're on the overworld map, it's not a random battle. You'll see, an enemy character there, and you can walk up to it and you'll start a battle. It'll go into the battle sequence like a JRPG, but then you run around
Okay.
and you got the battlefield which you're in, and it has, the good art graphics and everything. And then you get into say like a town or a dungeon or a cave or whatever, and that is also just like you just run into guys and you just start fighting.
So kind of how
Um,
some Final Fantasy games have handled it, where you kind of get into a battle
mhm.
area with the enemy and then you have free like
Mm-hmm.
free roam fighting. Okay, that
Right.
makes sense. That's pretty cool.
It does feel like a JRPG just as you traverse the world and walk around. It definitely does.
Cool. Okay, rad.
But yeah, it's real good. Both of those games are real quality, and I would very much recommend. So, yeah.
Cool, man.
Right on, man. Well, cool. Jonathan, man, you're up next. I see you have like 10 games in here of like Haba is Bob, Baba is Snot. Are these real games?
See, so Logan, I put like a few games in there, and Logan was like, the document says a few, and I was like, fine, you know what? So I started making up all these
That
names
sounds
or
like
like
Logan.
combinations of all these. So I ended up like 10 games. In all seriousness, no, In all seriousness,
Hey, words are
no.
hard.
I know. I've been traveling. Oh my gosh, you are getting better. I've been traveling a lot, so I've been like taking flights for work, and we did a road trip for a vacation recently, my wife and I, and so I've been like buying up some kind of smaller games that I thought I'd love to dive into. I downloaded Hob, which was originally a PS4 exclusive, and it's by the guys Runic Games, the guys that did Torchlight and Torchlight 2, which I love those games, so I grabbed it. And they're going for this kind of a quasi open world, not a true open world, Zelda basically kind of game where you explore, you fight a little bit, you solve some puzzles, and like the world transforms as you interact with it. The trailer looked awesome, so I got it, and I don't like it. Like
Oh, really?
I may need to spend some more time with it, but it's like I cannot tell you the number of times that I was
What
like,
would you compare it to?
compare it. Well, on the surface, the way what it's trying to be like is Zelda, and the problem is the game design is such that like multiple times I was clueless as what to do next. I was like,
Hmm.
where do I go? And I mean, I've played Zeldas and Zelda likes for decades now. Like, I'm pretty good at figuring out what to do. I love puzzle games. I beat The Witness. Like, I love figuring stuff
Yeah.
out. And it was literally like, I have no environmental clues, no anything. I have no idea what you want me to do, where you want me to go. And I got sick of running in circles, basically. And the combat was like stupid simple. Although I got the idea that it expanded out with more move sets, but for the time being, it was super simple. So kind of disappointed about Hob. I may try to give it some more time, but I don't know. I also decided to grab Cuphead because it came to Switch.
Yes.
It's lauded as this amazing, and it is gorgeous. I can't argue that.
So good.
Amazing,
So
challenging
good.
game, and I'm gonna put more time into it. I like it. It is just brutal. It's like, God, that game is
Really?
so hard for me. The first few
Okay.
levels were terrible, and then it started to get like I stopped with the whole airplane level because just it threw new mechanics at me, and
Mm-hmm.
I just lost my patience with it. But I like it. I want to spend more time in it, but I'm struggling. I refuse to do any of the bosses on like simple or whatever it is. I want to do them on like the regular setting, but who knows? Maybe
That's
I'll
the way to
switch.
do it, man. Like a man.
I know. So I'm working on
Get
that.
good.
I've been playing a little more of The Witness, like I mentioned earlier. It came to Epic Game Store for free, so I grabbed it on my Mac and I'm playing that. That's a great game. If you haven't played The Witness and you love puzzle games, like get it. It's awesome.
It's really good.
The main game I really want to talk about is Breath of the Wild. No, I'm just kidding. The main game.
Don't you dare. Dear listeners, let me fill you in on this a little bit. Jonathan here, like when he said that he's played Zelda games, like this, he's like the biggest Legend of Zelda fan I've ever met in my entire life. And this, how many hours do you have in Breath of the Wild? I tried to look in the other day, and I think it was like, was it 460? Is that correct?
I think 460 is what I'm at now. Yeah, pretty bad.
Wow.
Since March of 2017, so it's over a couple years. But yeah, for about 460.
But still, like I keep joking that we're gonna have like an intervention or something with this kid. Like, dude, you've got to stop playing Breath of the Wild. It's not 2017 anymore. You can play other games now.
I know.
I could see it for a multiplayer game, but a single player game, man, you're getting your mileage out of that.
And the thing is,
Yeah.
I can't quite describe why. It's just like my ultimate gaming comfort food. I just keep going back and just messing around. I don't know what it is. But for real though, the real game I want to talk about is Baba Is You. This game is brilliant. And it's BABA is you. Baba Is You, and it's simple, graphically simple. I mean, puzzle game. Where I won't spend too long explaining it. Just go look up the trailer for Baba Is You. Basically, you're in this little 2D top-down puzzle space or little kind of world space, and the elements of the puzzle, like the rules of like whether you can walk, like whether a wall stops you if you try to walk through it, or whether lava burns you, or whether a key unlocks a door. Those rules are stated by like um words on the screen, like as like little snippets of code in its most simple form. So like one phrase says Baba is you. And if you move that around and that phrase no longer lines up, then that's no longer true. Or like let's say the a word says flag is win, then that means if you touch the flag, you win. So if I'm encased inside of a wall and it says Baba is you in one place, and it says wall is stop, that means I can't go through the wall. And then flag is win, that means I touch the flag to win. But I'm inside the wall and the flag's outside the wall. Then if the wall is stop, I can't go through the wall. Well, I can maybe push words around so it says wall is you instead of Baba is you. Then I become the wall and I can move the entire wall and touch the flag and win.
What?
And so the whole game is built around the idea of rewriting the rules of the game. Like, you can tell, like lava is melt. Well, you can like push that word away. You can push the word melt away or the word lava away, so it breaks the alignment of the phrase, and then lava suddenly no longer hurts you. And I'm explaining some like early level concepts. They take that and run with it in ways that like I was not expecting. And I have been genuinely stuck for like 10, 20 minutes at a time on multiple levels. And it's gotten to the point where I can only handle a level or two and I have to put the game down and come back later. It's really challenging, but it's really satisfying when you finally figure out what to do. So if you're looking for a good puzzle game, the art style is real fun and kind of lighthearted and simple, and but it still has a polished feel to it. It doesn't feel cheap. I love this game. It's cheap. It's like $15, I think. So
I might have to check that out.
Good. I'm gonna have to pick that up at some point. My buddy Ben was recommending it the other day, so yeah, I'm gonna have to check that.
It's just I played so many puzzle games, and it's a completely unique take. I love the whole idea of pushing those words around. Pretty cool.
That sounds pretty cool. Is that only on the Switch, or what is that on?
I don't think so. I know it's on Switch for sure. I want to say it's also on Steam. I maybe even the other consoles, but I don't know. I'd have to look.
Okay. That sounds pretty cool. I'll have to check that out. So did you want to talk about Breath of the Wild at all, or is that a bad idea?
I kind of put that in there just to spite you. Half of my excuse for even playing the game is my son, my 2-year-old, genuinely does love watching me play. He'll run up to me and go like, I want to watch Link. And I'm like, all right, let's go. So we'll play. So sometimes I do play for him, but I also sometimes when I just feel like not learning a new game or thinking too hard or whatever, I'll just pop it. It's just so easy. The Switch is right there. You just grab it. I don't know. It's like comfort food. I love the game.
Yeah.
And I don't know what it is.
Fair enough.
It's weird.
Fair enough, man. Still think you got a problem, but we'll get that intervention going here at some point. Oh man. Do what?
I said I don't know what that's going to look like. I'm kind of terrified.
Oh, and it'll be fine. It'll be fine. It'll literally just be like that one episode of How I Met Your Mother where it's just a banner and we're like, dude, stop. And then you run out and then we're like, well, whatever. We tried. Well, as far as what I've been playing, more Tales of Vesperia. I don't really have much to add to it. I'm about 24 hours into the game now, and I'm still really enjoying it. The thing about this game, it feels different than other JRPGs that I've played, because in other JRPGs, you normally have this kind of narrative that you get a sense of like what the underlying story is and kind of where it's going. But in this one, it tends to jump from adventure to adventure to adventure, to where finally 20 or so hours in, it's starting to kind of narrow in on one specific storyline, which is fine, but it kind of made for the introduction part, like what exactly is the main goal of this game. And that's part of my problem, is I'm very objective oriented when it comes to gaming. If there's no objective, then I have a really hard time sticking with the game. But Tales of Vesperia is a lot of fun. I enjoy the cast of characters. There's a lot of goofy moments. There's a lot of just really silly moments. There's this moment where you're on a abandoned ghost ship, and two of your party members are they're like teenagers, and so they're getting scared, and the main character's like messing with them and like trying to freak them out and scare them. And so that whole segment was just really funny, and that's kind of what started the whole narrowing of the storyline. So it's fun. Combat simplistic until you level up your characters and What's cool about this game, and I can't remember which Final Fantasy game had this, but you equip the item, and so as you use it, I think it was Final Fantasy 9, as you use that item or as you use that weapon, you absorb that ability or that skill, and so then your character just has that throughout the rest of the game. And so it incentivizes grinding, but it rewards grinding too, so it makes it a little bit more meaningful. And so now my characters are just kind of OP because I spent time just adding all these skills to my characters. But it's a lot of fun. And man, this is the thing where this game has made me appreciate the Switch because of the portability. Because this past week, just Wednesday was really busy with a lot of different ministry stuff going on. And so I finally sat down after setting up all of our youth stuff, and I was like, I'm gonna like pull out the Switch, play this for 20 to 30 minutes just to relax before I have to go teach youth. And dude, the Switch is just awesome. Playing JRPGs on it is even better too. It's the perfect platform to play those on, just because you can pick it up and put 20 minutes in at a time and then move on. It's so good. It's so good.
Isn't it such a telltale sign that 2 years in, we're still every now and then looking at our Switch and going like, man, I can't believe this is real. Like, I still do that once in a while. I'm like, I cannot, like 5-year-old me cannot believe this exists. It's just so cool. Like, it hasn't gotten old. The novelty of it for me personally has not gotten old yet. It's unbelievable.
Me either. Especially, and dear listeners, let's just be honest, okay? It's really cool that you can play this on the TV, and then when you have to go, you pick it up, go into the bathroom, and continue playing. Okay, let's just be honest. That's what we use them for. But it's cool. I think the Switch is the perfect platform to play JRPGs on, just about any game, really. Period. So really enjoying that game. Still enjoying it. It's one of those games that I can just relax and play and just go on an adventure with these characters that are really endearing and really complex. The other game I do want to talk about is the new PlayStation 4 exclusive Days Gone. And how do I describe this game? It's like Last of Us in the open world, but with way more language and not nearly as good graphics, if that makes sense.
It looks gorgeous in the trailers.
See, that's the thing. When you look at the trailers, the game looks great, but then when you play it, there's moments where the game looks really good, and there's other moments where the game looks really, really bad. There was... And they're patching this stuff in, so probably by the time that any of you dear listeners are playing it, the game will have removed some of those inconsistencies. But there was a point where I was playing it, and your partner Boozer, can't believe his name's Boozer, he fires a shotgun blast, and the fire graphic that comes out of the shotgun looks like something out of early PS3 era, and I'm like, I know a lot of people probably wouldn't notice that, but I'm very nitpicky, and that just kind of was jarring. And speaking of jarring, the thing that grates on me the most, that actually forced me to stop playing the game until Sony Ben implements some kind of content modifier that removes the cussing, is just the ludicrous amount of language in this game. And normally language like cussing and stuff doesn't normally bother me in a game when it's kind of spread throughout. It's not every other sentence. But in this game, it's like every single sentence has some kind of cuss word in it. And the last time that I played it, within 5 minutes, they used GD and Jesus' name in vain about 6 to 7 times. And that's when I pulled back and was just, I looked at my wife and said, I'm done with this game. There's literally, dear listeners, I'm not exaggerating, nearly every line of dialogue in the first 3 hours that I played that game had some form of cussing in it, and had GD all over the place, and was taking the Lord's name in vain all over the place. And I was just like, look, if I'm gonna, and it's funny because I was studying Matthew 6, we're talking about the Lord's Prayer, where it says, our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be your name. It's like, if I'm going to follow that, I can't play this game where people are just desecrating my King, my God's name as nothing more than just a cuss word. It's really is ludicrous. I was shocked at just how much they put that into the game. It's just lazy writing, in my opinion. So
I feel like that's so bizarre too, just because that really kind of it reeks to me of a bygone era from like the early aughts where we were like, hey, video games can be adult, where we use bad language and talk about sex. And like, there was kind of this like early 2000s, like like Xbox
Yeah,
kind of era,
yeah.
like
50 Cent blood in its name.
edgy, bloody, cool. And then it's like video games kind of seem to grow up this generation of like, okay, like we can show gore and like have some language, but like we're actually gonna be adults about it. It's like that's kind of a weird return to like overkill to me. That seems like a poor choice.
Yeah.
I heard Days Gone described as kind of like an Ubisoft game, like a Far Cry or something kind of quality. Like, is it like that
That's
sort of?
pretty accurate, actually. It feels like a
Yeah.
Ubisoft game. And that's what was weird to me when I was playing it. I was thinking, this doesn't feel like a Sony exclusive game. Like when you play Horizon Zero Dawn, it feels like an exclusive title. Days
Yeah.
Gone doesn't, which is really weird. So there it is.
It uses Unreal Engine, I'm almost positive, which is one
Does it?
key because, like Horizon uses a proprietary Destiny engine. Naughty Dog has their engine. Detroit has their engine, or I should say Quantic Dream has their engine. So, and they're using Sony then used Unreal, I'm 95% sure. So that could play into some of that.
That might be why.
I was gonna say I'd love to hear the post mortem of this game, and I would. But I was also like, man, I feel like Bend. We've been talking about them so much the past few years in anticipation of what their game was going to be, that like they've stuck in my head as like this renowned Sony studio. And they've been with Sony for a while, but I'm looking at their history of their games. The last game they made was Uncharted: Fight for Fortune, and the last game they made before that was Uncharted: Golden Abyss, and then that was 2011. And the game before that was Resistance Retribution, and then it's like a string of siphon filters all the way back to 2000. So it's like, not to knock them, but they actually don't have the history I thought they did. And this kind of feels like their first actual like new IP that like they created themselves.
Well, it's
Since,
their
like,
first sort of
forever.
big console game too.
Yeah.
Their previous games have all been handheld, I think. So
Well, all the way
they've
back
been
to
working on this
PS2,
game
yeah.
for a very long time.
Yeah.
So, hopefully this is like, okay, this is their first one, and round two will be better, whether it's a Days Gone sequel or
Sure.
whatever.
Mhm.
Hopefully it'll be a better quality. But shame that this one kind of incubated for so long and came out this way.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that was frustrating about this game is actually, as far as the gameplay goes, I enjoyed it. Like, I'm the kind of gamer that will play the Ubisoft game and have fun climbing up towers and opening up the map and going across and exploring and stuff like that. I enjoy that, especially coming across like a horde of freakers, especially unexpectedly, is so horrifying that it's so much fun and it's a cool aspect of the game. But if it just allowed me to tone down the language or turn it off completely, I would still play the game because I think the gameplay by itself is totally fine. But since it's there and it's so prevalent, it gets in the way of the game so much that I can't enjoy it. So
Yeah.
it's frustrating, but dear listeners, if you guys are playing it, let me know what you think. The last game I want to talk about, just real briefly before we get into what we've been reading, is that good old Beat Saber using playing it on PSVR. It's just, it's so good. Micah, you have this, right?
Yes, I love it.
Dude, it's so good, isn't it?
Yeah, I was telling someone about it today. It's like the most raw like VR thing you can think of. It's like here's two sticks, start whacking these blocks.
Yep.
And it just feels right. It's so good. And they've been pumping out the new songs. There's some free songs, some downloadable, some paid songs, I should say. But yeah, they're keeping it updated. It is so good.
It really is.
Yeah, I saw that you nailed that one song on Expert recently.
Yeah. One of the DLC songs is called Overkill. It's like this heavy metal thing where when you play it on Expert, it feels like you're playing the drums, and
it looks insane.
My power's growing, man. Soon it'll be over 9,000 in this game.
Yeah.
For all you Dragon Ball Z.
You sent me that video of you doing that song. What was it? Overkill or something on Expert?
Yeah.
And I showed a couple of guys in my office, and I was like, dude, I explained what Beat Saber was, and I was like, this is my buddy. Watch what he did. And eventually, one of the guys was like, how is that humanly possible? I was
dude,
like,
if you think
it gets crazier.
Yeah, if you think that's nuts, go look up Overkill Expert Plus on YouTube and see how crazy that is. Because I was watching that earlier today, and I was like, "There's no way. There's no way."
That's
But
great.
Micah, you know this.
It's like watching those people on. It's like watching the old Fire in the Flames Guitar Hero
Yes.
experts.
Yeah,
Those
oh my
people
gosh,
just
dude.
like
Yes.
100% saying that.
Oh man.
Crazy.
But yeah, I managed to beat Angel Voices on Expert also earlier. So, dear listeners, if you don't know what that song is, you'll have to look that up and see how it is, because that one gets nuts. It's like a 7 or 8 minute long song. So
You're making me want to boot up Beat Saber right now.
I'm gonna do it after I finish this recording.
You just lost Micah.
It's so good.
I'm gone.
It's so good. But yeah, let's switch over to what have we been reading. Micah, man, what book have you had your nose in recently?
Well, in my small group at church, we've been going through the Book of James, which has been great. So that's always good to dive into that book. I love James. But recently at my job, I've sort of taken on a little bit more of leadership role and more responsibility and stuff. So I was looking for something to read that would tie my vocation to just kind of, connecting it to, the true design of work, and picked up Every Good Endeavor by Timothy Keller.
Nice.
And I'm about 3 or 4 chapters in, not very far in. But it is really good so far. Timothy Keller is in his usual form. If you love anything else he's written, this is great as well. But sort of the first couple of chapters, he's talking about the design of work and how, he uses the Genesis and creation account to set his argument about how work is ingrained in our DNA and how it's designed, and how, God worked and God delighted in his work. He said it was good, and he continued to work as our provider, and then he commissions us to work. Even before the fall, man was tasked to subdue the earth and cultivate it, and so on and so forth. So he draws these neat connections and stuff to the original design of work, and how it's not really this punishment that we sometimes view it as. Work is good, and it's meant for us to thrive. And if you go without work for a long time, it's you kind of feel like a significant loss almost. You like are unable to work or whatever. But anyway, it's just a real good book so far. Just kind of, again, connecting what you do to God's work. And yeah, so he talks about, rest a little bit too, and how, the 7-day work week is set up, so that you're working most of the time. And that's our normal sort of mode we should be in. But there is that very important time of rest, and how, rest, a lot of us have a hard time sort of turning off the switch when we go home after work or on the weekend or whatever. And he was talking about rest, and how, true rest is when you can look at something, anything, and not see the utility in it, and just enjoy it for its beauty or for what it is or for whatever. And you sort of just shut off that part of your brain. But anyway, just a real neat book so far. Every Good Endeavor, Timothy Keller.
Cool, man. I'm gonna have to look that up. I like that, looking at your work as not a utility, but appreciating the beauty of it when you're done and able to rest of that. That's pretty cool. Jonathan, man, what about you?
So a little bit of history behind what I've been reading. About a couple years ago, I think I randomly was like, I wonder if there's any good like fantasy novels out there I could get into, because I kind of felt like reading something. And I'd read like a few random ones. I didn't want to read them again, so I texted Logan and another friend of ours, Derek, and I was like, "You guys have any fantasy books you'd recommend?" And Logan was like, "Read Mistborn." So I was like, "All right."
That's a very tame way of how I said that, but okay. It's a very tame way of how I said that, because I'm pretty sure I started getting like nerding out on you about Mistborn.
You totally did. I was just for the sake of the story, for the sake of time. But yeah, he was like, "This book is amazing. You have to read it." And I got it, and then I started, and then I quit, whatever, like petered off, and finally got into it, read it, and it blew my mind. I mean, like, if it is such a good book, and I think I mentioned it on an old episode I was on, to the point that I was like, I got to read the rest of these books. It's like a franchise. So I read the second one. Good. I read the third one. I say read. I've been listening to the audiobooks, which is an excellent way to go. And just an incredible trilogy, to the point where I was like, the guy that wrote the books is Brandon Sanderson. And I was like, what else does this guy do? Well, at first I found out that the Mistborn trilogy actually continues beyond that. There's 3 additional books in like a second era that I read all those too. Then I found out he has an entire other franchise called the Stormlight Archive, and um, I've been reading those. As a point of comparison, they're massive novels. Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring. If you listen to the audiobook, it's about 5 hours. The Way of Kings which is the first book in the Stormlight Archive, is about 45 hours.
Oh man.
So, but the crazy thing, and actually the second book in that series, which I'm on right now, Words of Radiance, is 48 hours, and the third book is 55 hours. And the Mistborn books are a little shorter. They're in like the teens or like 20 something hour range. But the thing that's crazy about it is none of it drags, at least not to me. It's all very fascinating. He's extremely good at world building. He's extremely good at character interactions and character building, and like building up characters that you really, really care about and get to know extremely well. And he is a master, and this is kind of his main thing in my mind that most people love about him. He is a master at building out magic systems. And this is not the fire, water, lightning, ice magic that you know from everything you've ever seen. It is, and Logan can attest to this, it shines most brightly in the Mistborn series of just like his approach to what he calls magic is so wholly unique and so different than anything I've ever seen before. It's far better than any other fantasy I've ever read, and that holds true in this Stormlight Archive series, which the first book is The Way of Kings. Totally different, so engaging, so fascinating. It has like set rules and limitations, and like it's unbelievable. If you are looking for something that's extremely entertaining, I recommend the Stormlight Archive, and specifically the audiobooks. Because the books are so dang long, unless you're incredibly fast at reading, the audiobooks are a little easier to kind of kick back and listen through them. And the guy that narrates them is very, very talented, has a great voice. So yeah, I've been really, really loving those books. They're awesome.
Right on, man. Yeah, I remember getting hooked on the Mistborn, and then just like all the text that you sent me, like when you really started getting into the books and like burning through them, and just like all the text and stuff. And I was like, dude, at this rate, you're gonna surpass me, and I'm gonna be really behind. And then by the time I got to like I think 10% of the third book, you had already finished all of the Mistborn books. I'm like, well, now I'm really behind. So, but
I got hooked.
But yeah, dude. That's the thing about Sanderson's writing, man, is it just, and one of the things that I love about his writing is you cannot tell what he's going to do next. You can try and figure it out.
It's great.
It really is. My wife, when she reads books, she hates, because she's just able to like know where a story is going to go. And Sanderson's book is the first line of books that she's read where she can't guess anything that's going to happen, because he always just has a way of turning stuff on its head or throwing something in, like recalling something from early in the book, or he just has a way of writing. It's nuts. And it's funny that you bring that up, because I've been reading the third book in the Mistborn series, Hero of Ages, where I have no clue what's going to happen. I'm just at a point now where I'm like, I'm just going to put myself in this little roller coaster cart wherever it goes on the tracks, and that's where we're going. And so it's just,
I remember when I was reading through Hero of Ages, and even once you've read a lot of Sanderson and you know his style, it's still utterly impossible to know what he's doing. And I had like 3 or 4 different outcomes where I was like, okay, one of these few things are going to happen probably. Like I think I see where he's taking. And then he ended the book in a way that I was like, okay, it all made so much sense. It's one of those things where it's like, of course, like how did I not see this? And yet it's like impossible to predict. It's masterful writing like I've never seen. Frankly, and this is going to sound like blasphemy, but I believe it now. I've read so many of his books. I think he's a far more interesting writer and world builder than Tolkien.
Oh, I can agree with that.
I mean, like I love Tolkien and those are classics, but like Sanderson is far beyond what he did. So I recommend it.
Yep. It's good stuff. I can't really talk about the book because it's the third book in a series and spoilers and stuff. I will say this though, because you mentioned that he has a way of like writing in these magic systems. The thing that I love about Mistborn, and this is what drew me in initially, is how weird it sounded at first, because this is basically how it goes. You have these characters called allomancers that are able to ingest or drink these this kind of like solution that has bits of metal in them, and they're able to burn that metal in their bodies, and they get different kinds of abilities. Like you can be a 10-eye where you see really well and you see really far. I can't remember which one it is that allows you to enhance your senses, but you can burn that metal.
It's
And
10.
then you haven't, what is it?
10 enhances all the senses.
Oh, 10 enhances. Oh, okay. Well,
Yeah,
if you
hearing,
burn 10, then you can like smell things. There's one where you can get super strong. There's other ones where you can influence people's emotions in different ways. It's really unique. Like it's a unique way of implementing superpowers basically into a story, but it's cool, man. I haven't read anything quite like it. It's really good.
When he first like explains like what the different metals do when you burn them and like kind of what their basic abilities are, it's like, okay, so that one makes you strong and that one makes you see well or hear well, and that one it enables you to like push on metal or pull on metal, or okay, like I guess that's cool. And then he starts to implement the different abilities and show how they can be used, and definitely in combat, but also in a myriad of other ways. And it starts to melt your brain. You're like, whoa, this is incredible. And it gets to the point where it's far, far more interesting than your typical superpowers from any other kind of like mystical book. It's masterfully done.
That's really good. That's good stuff. Micah, if you haven't read these books yet, man, you better get on it.
Yeah, sounds awesome. I'm almost positive my wife has read the first one, maybe the second one. I need to double check with her. I'm almost positive she's read these and said similar things that you are saying. But yeah.
Oh, and the last thing I'll say, we can move on. Logan, I know you told me one time that Camilla kind of fell off the bandwagon with book 4. I highly recommend. Book 4 is probably my least favorite book for sure, but it's definitely the shortest one as well. And if she can get through that one, it's a good book. If she can get through that one, the next two really kind of bring things back into how they used to be in a few ways that I won't spoil, and are excellent. So yeah, you maybe, I don't know if she wants to read them again, but
I'll have to see if I can riot her emotions a little bit to get her. There you go. Only people who have read the book will have got that joke. Anyway, one of the other things I do want to talk about as far as what I've been reading, and this is just real brief. I've been started a new series with my students in the last 3 weeks we have together on our Youth Wednesdays, is the topic of prayer, which is something that I've talked about with my students here and there, but nothing really super in depth where we spent like 3 weeks talking about it. And the next 3 weeks we're going to be spending time in Matthew 6 talking about where really Jesus breaks down what prayer is, how not to do it, how to do it, and things like that. And this past week we went over verse 7 and 8. I mean, we went through more verses than that, but those are the ones I want to hone in on, where Jesus says, "And when you pray, do not heap up empty phrases as the Gentiles do, for they think that they will be heard for their many words. Do not be like them, for your Father knows what you need before you ask them." And it just got me thinking, because I had watched American Gospel recently about the prosperity gospel and how just terrible it is. When you see those guys pray, they're really making a mockery out of prayer because they're trying to use fancy words. They're trying to say things a certain way, and essentially it's kind of like they're trying to manipulate God to do what they want. And it just, reading through that and teaching it to my students, it just made me think that like the quality of your words or the quantity of your words is not going to manipulate God into giving you what you want. And I don't know, it's just one of those things that I think we tend to fall into as Christians, even, where we think that, oh, well, I'm going to show God how much I care about this because I'm just going to pray this same phrase again and again and again and again, so he knows I'm serious, and then he'll definitely answer my prayer. But it's like, if what you're praying for isn't within the will of God, I mean, he's going to answer it, but he's going to tell you no. And no amount of you saying the right words or using these big theological terms is going to change that necessarily, because it's God's will. And so this is part of a whole larger thing, because I went to Secret Church a couple weeks ago, where David Platt just spent 6 hours talking about a specific topic. And he spent this past year on prayer, fasting, and the pursuit of God. And just the whole extensive study of prayer in and of itself is just so mind-blowingly good that, dear listeners, you need to go to radical.net and check it out. But that verse there in Matthew chapter 6, verses 7 and 8 just got me thinking, like, God knows what I'm going to ask for before I even ask, so I can just be direct. Not like demanding, but just not waste time, if that makes sense. And so anyway, it was a good study, and dear listeners, I would highly recommend y'all go check out those verses there, especially when it gets into the Lord's Prayer, because that stuff is just, when you really study the Lord's Prayer and what it is, when you implement that into your prayer life, I can't see you not ever praying again when you think about it. It's cool stuff.
Awesome. Yeah, one of the things I was talking about with a buddy of mine recently was like the idea of praying in a ritualistic way, or like, okay, I've got to make sure that when I pray, I use these words, or I say this, 20 times, whatever it is. What that does is definitely in your heart and in your mind is it brings the control in your head back to you. Like, it's about what I'm doing. So if I say these things and I use these words, and I can get what I want from God. And whereas like God wants to be like, we pray to him and he has the answers, he has the plan. We're just praying and asking him. So it's like we always are looking for ways to pull that control back to us as if we can take it. And so that's just one other way it can be a dangerous endeavor.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. Good stuff. Well, dear listeners, let's get into the topic of the show. We're going to talk about our favorite game consoles. Now, this is kind of where we're just going to go back and forth and just talk about, our favorite game consoles, but also some of our favorite games on those systems. So it's kind of an extension of one of our more recent episodes where we did like the must-play games. So this is just an excuse to add even more games to that list and hopefully not tempt you to grow your backlog. But let's go ahead and get started, man. Micah, when it comes to this topic of your favorite game consoles and some of your favorite games, man, let's start off with this one. What is one of those consoles for you in a game or two that's on that system?
Oh my goodness. Where to even start?
It's an impossible task.
I'm glad Mike is going first, because like
I've got like basically all the consoles that I play. First off, can we do this one thing real quick? Can we go down and talk about the consoles that we owned, and not necessarily which that we didn't, but just kind of like, I own this one, and go down the line.
Yeah.
Because that would help inform, like, oh, you didn't have a Genesis, or you didn't have a Dreamcast, or whatever, that sort of stuff. So I owned a NES first, and then a Sega Genesis. Did not own an SNES.
Oh wow!
And then I went from a Sega Genesis to a PlayStation 1, and then I've had PlayStation ever since then. Basically, I had PS2, PS3, and then I also had a 360 and a Wii, and I have a PS4 now and a Switch. So that's my lineage, I guess.
What about handhelds?
I only had an original Game Boy, the original, green colored screen Game Boy, and that is it until the Switch.
Wow, okay.
Really lacking in the handheld department.
It's all good.
Excuse me, I did own a PSP briefly for Crisis Core, but that was it. So I guess the one I'll pick out is the PlayStation 1, because and I think age is like a big is important when you talk about like like how old you were when you consumed certain consoles and that sort of thing. I was 14 when I bought my PlayStation, and so very impressionable age, and so I'm consuming all these games that like are just completely new and different because of 3D and stuff. So like Twisted Metal and Tekken 2 and Tomb Raider and Resident Evil 1 and stuff like this, and it's just blowing my ever-loving mind. But then Metal Gear Solid came out.
Yes.
And
let's go.
Absolutely changed everything for me. I didn't realize that games could tell stories that were like movies until Metal Gear Solid. I didn't realize that stealth was a genre until Metal Gear Solid. I didn't realize that you could have voice acting of this caliber until Metal Gear Solid. I didn't realize so many things, that this game had so many little details and little Kojima-isms that just were broke the mold at the time. You talk about Psycho Mantis controller. You talk about taking the pills so you steady your aim, fighting Sniper Wolf. You talk about, I mean, it's so many things. And Metal Gear Solid defined all this stuff, and it's still one of my favorite games of all time. So I can't really, when I think of like my years of yore, I think of the PlayStation. I think of Metal Gear.
Awesome.
That's such a good game. I remember playing that for the first time when I got a PS3, and I mean, I guess I played the remake on GameCube, but I didn't really get too far into it. But I remember getting a PlayStation 3 right around the time that Adam started getting on the show here, and picked up the, what is it, Metal Gear Solid Legacy Collection that has like all of the games on it except for 5, and playing it, and it was just like, dude, I missed out. Like, this is a really cool game, and I mean, it looks like a PlayStation 1 game by today's standards, but I think it still holds up.
It does.
Like, it's really good. Like, my favorite thing is probably when you first see Revolver Ocelot for the first time, and he's wielding his gun and doing all those tricks. And Psycho Mantis is still super memorable with how he reads your memory card and says certain things. Like, it just it's so cool. Like, it made me wish I would have played. It made me wish I would have gotten a PlayStation 1 just to play this game, because it's one of the coolest games I've ever played. I'll totally agree with you on that.
When the Cyborg Ninja came out for the first time, and spoiler, sliced off Ocelot's arm, I think I was in like preteen heaven.
You're like, this game has ninjas too?
Oh, I was losing it. I was on cloud nine for sure.
Oh, what a game. What a game. Jonathan, man, so let's do that. Yeah, list the game consoles that you've owned and then hone in on one in a game.
So surprise, surprise, my console lineage is very Nintendo heavy.
No way. You
started off on the Nintendo Entertainment System, Mario Brothers 3 and Mega Man 4 and all those great games. And pretty much just for the sake of time, I have owned every single Nintendo console except for the Super Nintendo. Only because during that period, yeah, it's crazy. It's like the one console that like is so many people's favorites, and I'm sure would have been mine too. During that period of my life, my parents decided that video games were evil.
Oh, wow.
And in no uncertain terms. And they're like, we're not going to have any more video games in our house. No more video games. And so during the era of the Super Nintendo, that was the rule in our house. So I just missed it all. And then by the time the N64 came out, my older brother kind of talked my parents back into it and was like, it's not that big of a deal. It's just Mario and this. And like, we're not going to get like a PlayStation with all their evil, gory games. You know, we're going to get a Nintendo. And like, fine. And so my mom and dad were like, okay, fine. So then they got us an N64, and then I've had every one since then. So I married a girl who still has her Super Nintendo. So it all worked out.
Okay. I'm sorry. Very I thought you were going to say that you married a Nintendo console for a second, and I was like, wait.
Married to my Nintendo Switch. No.
Oh, man.
No. So, no, Lisette, when we started dating, we were hanging out at her place or whatever and talking about video games. She's like, yeah, I still have my Super Nintendo. I was like, you what? I was like, I never had one of those. Like, show it to me. So we still have like Mario World and Donkey Kong Country and all those on there. So that's kind of cool.
Man.
And of course, now I have an SNES Classic. So really,
there you go.
So my life is complete now, but I do wish I'd had those memories back then. Anyway, and then I've also owned every single Nintendo handheld that's ever been made, with the exception of like the Advanced SP, which is like a different version, or like some of the DSs.
Oh,
but
yeah.
Everyone from each family of like handheld consoles. Beyond that, I could not understand why anybody would ever want to own a PlayStation for like most of my childhood. Like every time I got my hands on one, first of all, my friends only ever showed me like dumb racing games and stuff. So I was like, why does anybody want
Ridge Racer?
Giant crabs. So, and then I always hated the controller. I always thought the controller was garbage. I just did. And so I've never owned a PlayStation until the amazing PS4, which I love.
Here we go.
Got that soon after launch, and I have not regretted it. It's an amazing console. We don't have to reiterate that. Everyone knows that. But I did own an Xbox 360. Never owned an Xbox One. I did have a PSP. That was pretty awesome. Played some God of War on there and played some bunch of other stuff. And I had like a Vita for a short time, but didn't really get into that. Don't send me hate mail. That's pretty much it. If I had to narrow one down, that's extremely difficult to do. But if I'm gonna, I guess if I have to pick a criteria, like the console that was like the most revelatory and mind blowing for where I was at in life and everything at the time was probably the N64. Especially coming off
Yeah.
of not only the NES, but like a drought of not having games for a while. It was like video games are back, and holy cow, how are they doing this 3D thing? Um,
I think that era was big for a lot of people. I called out PlayStation, N64 and PlayStation were competitors. And around that time, there were so many, of course, it was getting into the 3D
mhm.
space, but there were so many games that were instrumental in a lot of people that are, I guess, in TRG now. But yeah.
Well, what's crazy about that era too was like we kind of figured out a few of the rules of like 2D platforming, and then I say we, like we as an industry, I guess, kind of perfected those rules with like the Super Nintendo and some of that era of 16-bit games. And then 3D came along, and it was like, man, it's like VR is right now. It's kind of no man's land, and people are
Mhm.
figuring it out. And then like people like Kojima came along, and they're like, no, this is how you tell a story. This is how you do stealth. This is how you make this interesting. And like Miyamoto came along and said, this is how you platform and move and control a camera in 3D space. And like this is how you do like a puzzling like Zelda game, whatever. And like some of these legendary guys came along and like set the rules for like this is how these should work. And we've constantly improved since then, but like without those guys like setting that in, it was very clear that lots of other people were doing it very wrong. And without those few like industry leaders to set those rules, who knows where we'd be? Like they figured it out. And
It's crazy to think how good the camera in Mario
mhm.
64 is still. Like how good it was the first
Yeah,
time,
I still fire that game up once in a while using a method that I won't mention. And it is like, wow, this camera is I mean, it's not like modern cameras, but it's really good. And actually, that is the game I'm going to have to mention. I debated it for a while, past couple days, like what game would I pick? I think it would have to be Mario 64 because I will never forget when I fired that game up. That stands out as one of my all time top gaming moments of my whole life. Like I could not believe it. It was everything I ever wanted, and man, like playing that game over the next several months or however long I played, the next several years, really, I played it multiple times, was just a joy. And that game is still a masterpiece of design and mechanics and everything. That'd be mine. I think Super Mario 64. I know that's a pretty vanilla pick, but it's there for a reason.
Hey, yeah.
The game's also a classic too. Like it's one that I think you could still boot up today and just have a lot of fun. Like have as much fun with that as you do with Mario Odyssey. And it's just
Oh, yeah,
I think
absolutely.
it's one of those games that really stands the test of time in a really, really cool way.
Hmm.
I remember playing that and just man, that game's a trip when you first like I don't know, maybe back then playing it for the first time it was a trip. Now you probably play it and kids are like, this is ugly. But like, it's just I don't know. There's something about that game that's cool, especially when you kick the penguins off the edge of that ice level.
Oh,
Um but yeah. So I guess for me then, the consoles owned I've owned I've owned every Nintendo console also with the exception of the Wii. I never owned No, I did own a Wii when I got married. I inherited one. Okay.
yeah.
So yeah, I've owned all the Nintendo consoles then. I also owned a Xbox 360 right around the time that the Wii came out because that was when I jumped off from GameCube and went to Xbox. Had a Sega Genesis, had a PS3, doesn't have a PS2. That's all I had. And as far as handhelds go, pretty much every core iteration of a handheld that Nintendo made I had. So I had the Game Boy, Game Boy Advance, DS, 3DS, those. Had the Vita at one point. Actually, I had several Vitas because I kept selling them and rebuying them.
You did. I remember that.
It's so bad. So bad. My wife still likes to make fun of me. Like when I was buying and selling those again and again, like that's the reason she came up with the rule of if you trade this in or you sell this, you're not buying it again. It's all because I kept doing it with the Vita.
That's probably a good rule.
It's a very good rule. It's very cost effective. But I don't think I'm missing anything. I think that's everything. But for me though, the one I'm going to talk about is the Sega Genesis, man. It's the one that, like, I had an NES and that got me into gaming with Mario Brothers, Duck Hunt, Excite Bike, all that. But like the Genesis was the one that I got hooked on. There were so many games that I played on that, like Lion King, which was brutally hard. I couldn't get past I can't wait to be king level. I don't recommend that game to anybody. It's harder than Dark Souls. But had Gargoyles based on the old cartoon show, but the one that I loved the most was the first Sonic the Hedgehog, which is fitting because the new trailer for the movie came out and it's amazing. I can't wait to go see it. And apparently they're going to fix Sonic and make him look more like he does in the game, which is good.
I was just about to say they're going to fix
Which is good. It's so good. Jim Carrey as Robotnik is just so perfect. Anyway, but playing that game, man, was just like, I remember sitting in front of the TV and playing that game for hours and hours, and I wasn't very good at it because I couldn't follow Sonic because he would be super fast and then I would lose him. And I learned playing that game. I had my very first experience with anxiety in the chemical zone when he's underwater, and if you stay underwater too long, it starts making that like dun 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 dun. And then like Sonic drowns and he falls off the screen. Like it's so terrifying. I hate that level. But
I can see this 10-year-old Logan's just sweating, like
sweating profusely. Yeah. It's so good. But like, man, to me, when I was a kid, like, to me, Sonic was on the same level as Batman. Like, he was that cool. And when you see
that
Sonic
hair,
just kind of do what?
It's that hair, man.
That's what it is, man. It's the spikes. It's the blue. It matches Batman's cowl. It just goes with it. I think we just figured out that Batman is Sonic, or Sonic is Batman. Anyway,
you need a sound effect for that. That realization.
I don't have one. I mean, does that work? It's from Final Fantasy. Anyway,
that's always.
But like, what's cool, this is what blew my mind the first time that I played this game, was like, if you have Sonic just stand there and wait for a while, he looks at you, puts his hand on his hips and taps his shoe and will look at his watch every now and then. I didn't realize he did that until I got up and walked off for, I don't know, however long, came back and he was doing that. And I was like, oh, Sonic's real. He can hear me and stuff. And I'm like,
in there.
I basically thought Sonic was like, it's like Toy Story where they come to life when you go away. Anyway, but Sonic, man, Sonic was the one that really got me into games. I know everybody's first game was Mario, and my first game was Mario also, but Sonic was the one that got me hooked, dude. So good. And like Sonic Mania is like a refresh of all. I'm going to go on a tangent if you guys allow me, but the Genesis with Sonic the Hedgehog, that's where it all started for me.
There's so many good games for
There
Genesis.
really is.
I've got a few jotted down here. Streets of Rage. It was awesome. I don't know about you guys, but I got into the Spider-Man game Maximum Carnage. It was available for SNES as well.
Dude, me too.
Dude. Throwback.
So good.
That was one of my jams back then. I would rent that game over, and I don't know why I didn't buy it. I just would rent it over and over and over again.
I think,
but
that was on the Genesis. It was called Separation Anxiety, wasn't it?
That was the sequel. There's two of them. Maximum Carnage was the first one, and then Separation Anxiety.
That was the sequel.
And they're both
great title.
What?
Yeah, it's weird.
That's back in the 90s when people were trying to like name their game something really cool. It's like, let's call it Separation Anxiety and put it in this like MTV font.
Right.
Yeah, basically.
Not even joking. I'll send it to you guys in a second. But Micah, go ahead and go on with your next one, man.
Well, you want to talk about Genesis or go to a different console?
You do what you want, man. We just do what we want.
Okay, well, let's talk. I'm going to change gears here and talk about the PlayStation 2 for a minute, because this console to me is special. Well, I'm pretty sure, it's the leader in sales, like worldwide sales. The PlayStation 2 is still king at like 155 million or something like that. So that was the OG. That DVD player sold it, but the games sold it as well. Of course, you had the follow up to Metal Gear Solid, Metal Gear Solid 2, Sons of Liberty, and Metal Gear Solid 3, Snake Eater, which are both Snake Eater, especially, is a 10 out of 10. And then the Masterclass Shadow of the Colossus comes out and wows everyone. It wowed me. You had Kingdom Hearts. That's where it started on PlayStation 2. God of War 1 and 2. The Burnout 3. There's so many good PlayStation 2 games. But yeah, that console had some legs to it, and really, it was kind of when the Xbox came out and Halo came out. That sort of was like, okay, PlayStation 2, step aside, and Halo took over the world. But yeah, man, that console was almost unstoppable for a while.
It really was, man. I remember, didn't a lot of people buy the PS2 because it was the cheapest DVD player on the market at the time?
Yeah, that's sort of what I was alluding to up front. But it had it was a cheap DVD player, so that was one of the main reasons people would get it, or a big selling point at least.
So good, so good.
Really
Gosh, dude.
understandable.
Sorry, you mentioned Metal Gear Solid 3, and now I'm thinking of that game again. Just it's so good. It's a masterpiece.
Yeah, I'm getting a real itch to play the whole Metal Gear Solid 1, 2, 3, and 4 again. Like that set. I don't know. I gotta maybe when the PS5 comes out, they'll do another anthology or something.
I hope so. That'd be nice. I wish they would have ported the anthology to PS4 because those games, it's so good. Even Metal Gear Solid 2 is really good, and I know a lot of people didn't like it because like you play as Raiden, but it's still really good. Like, oh man, that's why I get real confused when people say like Kojima's a hack or something. I'm like, what? Are you playing the same games I am? Like, oh, come on.
Has anybody say that?
He hasn't made that.
Dude, yeah. There's a couple people in the Facebook group who have said that a couple times. I'm like, stop.
These
Stop.
children.
These kids. Anyway, Jonathan, man, you're up next. What's your next favorite stuff things?
I could just go on for hours. It's so hard. I mean, I guess. Oh man, it's just so difficult. A quick story, if you'll indulge me. I recently tried to get a buddy of mine who is super new to gaming, and it is kind of getting into it. He got a Switch and loved some of the games on there, and then I was like, "You should get Mario Odyssey." And I let him borrow my cartridge for a while to check it out, and he got a little ways into it, and he was like, "I don't know, man. Like the art style seems to be all over the place, and like it's really colorful, like blindingly so, and it's like." It seems weird and wacky, and like I just don't know if I can like get into it. And I was like, "That's cool. It's not for everybody. Like whatever." And then he works with me, and we took that business trip recently. He sat next to me on the plane, and I just had it itching to play Super Mario Brothers 3, which is one of my all time favorite games on the NES. And I had the emulator on my Switch, so I was just playing Mario 3, and I was just playing through the game, and he like couldn't take his eyes off of it. And he was like, "Is this that Mario game you were telling me about? You played when you were a kid?" And I was like, "Yeah, man, this is it. This is one of my all time favorites." And he was like, he watched me play for like 45 minutes or something, which is a lot of levels in Mario 3. And he was like, "I think I get it now." He was like, "I don't know why, but something clicked with watching you play that game. Like, I see the inspiration of Odyssey, but it kind of brings it down to like with the core of what it was inspired by. And like I see the tight design, and it is really fun. Like the clouds have eyes. I didn't notice that before. That's kind of cool. Like I thought it was really fun. And like he was like, it's just kind of a whimsical world. So he went back to Odyssey, and now he can't put it down. Like
Nice.
something about the perspective
Cool.
of like not the original, but like close to the original Mario 3. Something about that, like it clicked for him, and he was like, I get what Mario is about now. And he was able to kind of piece that together. And that to me was really cool just to see that. Because it's like, it's easy to think that like the only reason I love these old games is because I played them when I was a kid. And they're garbage now, but I just love them because I played them. And it's like, no, some of these games like Metal Gear or Mario 3 or Halo or whatever are just going to always be awesome. Like they're just great games, period. No matter how old they get. And that was a really cool indicator. But that was kind of a roundabout way of saying like, yeah, Mario 3. I know I've mentioned 2 Mario games now, but what can I say? That's another big one for me. I think the NES was a special console. I mean,
Well, the thing about going back to the story you're talking, the thing about Odyssey that is so good is that it is built in such a way. I mean, the throwbacks and the callbacks that it has to previous games, I mean, it allows you to appreciate the old Mario in it.
Yep.
It's you know what I'm saying. Like they have so many just very well thought out and designed just touches, just a little section of this one level. It's like, oh, what? And we're just if it like the first time you go 2D for I don't know, just little
Yes.
stuff like
It
that.
does feel in a way like a best of, but not in a blatant sense of like, here's a level from Sunshine. But the DNA of all the Mario games is in there. I know what you're saying. Like you can feel them all there. It's incredible design.
Yeah. It's a really good love letter to the fans, longtime fans, and even some of the newer ones in certain ways. But I guess we're just going to keep it on the Nintendo train here, because the one I want to talk about next is everybody's favorite purple lunchbox, the GameCube. And I don't know, man. I know this one didn't sell well, apparently. I just found that out like a few years ago. But I loved my GameCube. It's easily probably not, it's not my like number one favorite console I've ever owned, but it's definitely in the top 3. I loved that thing. And the game that I probably spent the most hours on the GameCube is Animal Crossing. Like,
that is not what I thought you were gonna say.
I know. I like to throw curveballs, but dude, I loved Animal Crossing, man. And I think it was just at this time in my life where, I didn't really, and this is going to sound really just, let me get the music going for it. It was at this time in my life where I just didn't have a whole lot of friends, so I didn't really get invited out to parties and all that jazz. And so it was always cool to boot up Animal Crossing at like 8:30 at night, especially on a Saturday, go to the town square, and there's KK Slider just playing his guitar, man. And he's just like, "What's up, buddy? You want me to play a song?" I'm like, "Yeah, KK Slider, I want you to play me a song, man." And he plays some cool little jam. He pulls out some funky music. Maybe he'll pull out some jazz one week. He might pull out some other stuff the other week. And it's the one time in my life I felt like I had friends.
It's so sad.
I love this soundboard, but no, there is a little bit of truth to that, because again, I didn't really get because all the kids at the time were out to like partying and making out and stuff, and I'm like, you guys are just getting drunk at like 12 years old. I don't know how old I was at the time, but people were just getting into the crap that I just didn't have any desire to get into, and so I was playing Animal Crossing and was really enjoying it, being able to customize a house and meet these different characters and go to the island to collect bugs or something like that, or go fishing or visit some friends' towns, using the memory cards. Just those little things. There is so much to do in that game that when you really think about it, if you enjoyed Animal Crossing, you'll love Stardew Valley, because Stardew Valley is basically, it's Animal Crossing on crack. It's really what it is. And it's just, Animal Crossing was one of my favorite games, man. Jonathan, you remember when I got it on my 3DS and somehow convinced you to pick it up, and I poured hours upon hours into it. Animal Crossing is just one of my favorite games.
Sorry, I keep cutting you off. Go ahead.
No, go ahead, man.
I was going to say, I remember when you were like, you got to play this Animal Crossing game, and I was like, I've heard of Animal Crossing, but what's the deal? And you were like, look, you build a house, you customize it, you go fishing, you catch bugs, and you talk to animals. And I was like, that sounds like the worst video game I've ever heard.
Yes.
Sounds like garbage. Leave me alone. I'm going to go play Metroid. And you were like, no, dude, you have to try it. It's so good. It sounds boring. You got to. I was like, fine. You know what? Fine. I'm going to buy the stupid Animal Crossing. Bought it. Freaking game was so addicting. Like,
yeah, dude.
How is a game about collecting bugs and fossils and other things and owing debt to a raccoon, for crying out loud? How is that fun? And they did it. Like, it's just that one more thing, that collectathon kind of thing. Yep. And like, I wasn't so much about getting to know the characters and like writing them letters and stuff that didn't interest me much, but like exploring and like, okay, I know I need like these 2 more fish. So if I fish during the rain in the river, I'll get these. And
Yeah,
like,
dude.
oh my word, it's stupidly addicting. I could not believe. Like Lisette would watch me play, my wife, and she'd be like, "What are you playing?" And I'm like, so it's Animal Crossing. I tried to explain it to her, and she was like, "That sounds like the dumbest thing I've ever heard of." I was like, "Well, it kind of is, but it's awesome too."
It's like, don't judge me. You play The Sims, okay? This is way more in depth.
Right? No kidding.
Oh man, that's why I'm pining for Animal Crossing to come to the Switch, because I know my wife will never see me again once I get it, because I can take the Switch with me wherever I go.
Isn't it coming this year?
Do what?
Oh yeah,
Coming
Are
out
they
this year?
are
they
they
have
making one for the Switch?
so on their
I thought.
recent earnings call, they reconfirmed a 2019 release.
Okay, yeah, I thought it was supposed to be coming out. I think E3 will.
Yeah, I'm sure it will. I'm sure.
Oh my gosh. Yes. Are you okay? Micah, you better.
Logan, hold on. Pause. We're gonna talk
Yeah,
about
I was
this
gonna say you better go with your next one, otherwise I'm gonna go on another rant. Oh man.
later.
Oh man.
Well, let's go to okay, so up until this point, I feel like games, like you'd have a game here and there that would kind of show some I don't know, just maturity, for lack of a better word. And once you got to this generation, I'm talking about the 360, PS3, and I guess we'll say Wii generation as well. I feel like kind of games en masse sort of grew up, and you started getting some really thoughtful, I don't want to say quote mature games, it's just games for adults, like Braid. Jonathan Blow's
Yes.
Braid came out on Xbox Live Arcade and like basically started the I don't know, it's just the indie game wave that we have that just came for and hasn't stopped. Braid was one of the first ones to kind of be like a mass market push by Microsoft and say, here's this really intelligent 2D side scroller, and it like charmed everybody that played it. And you had games like BioShock come out, and we've talked about BioShock extensively on this podcast and its brilliancy. You had games like The Last of Us. It's just you had all these games kind of just really tell these mature stories that um when I think of this generation, I think of like kind of that sort of these sort of mature stories and sort of growing up a little bit, and getting away from some of the corniness, I guess, of previous generations or whatever. But yeah, it's tons of great games on this generation. Halo 3, Halo Reach, Metal Gear Solid 4, the Uncharted series, Gears of War, so many good games. But yeah, the PS3, 360 is kind of uh, those three consoles, the PS3, the 360, and Wii, they were all successful, really successful.
Yeah.
I guess we're like what you're seeing now with PS4, Switch, and Xbox One. They're all successful to their own degrees. So it's just cool to see that. But yeah.
Straight up, man.
I would say I could probably go on about a couple more Nintendo consoles and how great they all were and handhelds and all that, but I think just for the sake of keeping it different, the Xbox 360 really does stand tall as one of my more impactful consoles, just because I had a pretty exclusive Nintendo history and was happy with it. I wasn't like, I saw what else was out there and I was like, I'm pretty cool. Like I was fine. And then finally got a three. I wanted to get an Xbox, but couldn't afford it at the time. And I played tons of Halo with my friends at all their LAN parties, and I beat the campaign, all that stuff. Halo was incredible, and I played a bunch of Xbox games, but I actually owned a 360, and the 360 was the point where I finally got into RPGs. I had tried my hand at various old school RPGs, like on PC and stuff, and I was like, I just don't. This is too much. Like it's too complicated. I don't understand
Yeah.
what's going on. And then I actually got a 360, and everybody was like, "You gotta play Skyrim. You gotta play Skyrim." Tried
Oh man, here
Skyrim,
we go.
and I was like, "Well, no, you'd be surprised." Tried Skyrim, and I was like, "Still too much going on. I don't like why. What do I do with all this inventory? Like, where am I supposed to go? I don't understand these quest system things." I bailed on Skyrim after like 8 hours. We couldn't get into it, and I was like, RPGs are just not for me. Then on a whim, I picked up a little game at GameStop, like totally randomly stopped by one day, and I was like, what do they got here? On a whim, picked up a little game I had read nothing about called Kingdoms of Amalur Reckoning.
Yes.
And oh
Good
my
cover.
word. What'd you say, Micah?
It was a good cover. Maybe you
Yeah,
picked
and
it up
that's
just
what
based on, I don't know.
frankly, that's what caught
cover.
me, and I remember distinctly thinking, "I'm going to regret this. This is gonna be some trash game," but the cover kinda got me. I did a quick search on my phone, and I was like, "Okay, it's scored high enough, like, fine." And dude, Logan, I mean, it's
Oh, I
just
know.
what a game. That was my gateway drug into RPGs. And now I'm playing. I mean, I play stuff like Divinity Original Sin and like all these other ones. Got back to Skyrim, fell completely in love. I beat Skyrim twice now, pretty thoroughly, different classes.
Nice.
And now RPGs have elevated one of my favorite genres, all because of a little game on 360 called Kingdoms of Amalur Reckoning, which has perhaps one of the most tragic stories behind it of all time, and how it didn't sell well. It got completely overshadowed
Yeah.
by Skyrim,
Yeah.
and they had a horrible financial situation, and like the IP is in DHQ Nordic's hands now, so we'll see what happens. But um, man, it actually I can honestly say it doesn't hold up now quite as well as I thought it might. I did try it recently on Steam when I had a PC for a little while, and it's a little rough around the edges
Mhm.
by modern standards.
Mm-hmm.
But I am forever indebted to that game for opening me up to an entire genre.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, that's cool.
Gosh, that's it. And it's funny that you said that. I can attest. I mean, I remember there were times where me and you would spend like a good probably 20 minutes just gushing about that game every now and then. It's so good. You know, the guy that wrote the story has like a huge series of books, right? Like in the
Yeah,
fantasy
R.A.
genre.
Salvatore.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
yeah, yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
just making sure. I didn't know if you knew
Yeah,
that or
yeah.
not.
Well, that's one of the great things about it is they brought in top talent. They brought in R.A. Salvatore and one other guy, I forget his name. And they brought in some pretty talented guys, and the combat is really good, and the quests are interesting, and they actually
Mm-hmm.
built a really great fantasy world. But it's simple enough that it's like you can get into it without really being like an RPG guy, which is what got me into it. So they
Yep.
wrote a really fine line that's I think hard to pull off, and they did it well. And yeah, I could go on about that game for a long time.
Yeah, man. Straight up. Well, I'm going to keep this train rolling because I'm going to talk about the 360 also. I mean,
Yeah, buddy.
my wife will tell you, like, there are days where I will sit there and just look at the TV and just be like, I miss the days of the 360. Like, I miss my Xbox 360. That was
Mm.
easily.
I missed the
Do
blade,
what?
the blades on the
Dude,
dashboard.
yes, I was there for the blades. It's like,
Love
man,
it.
the thing about getting the 360, I remember when I got my 360 because I traded in, I'm pretty sure it was my GameCube I traded in. It felt like this moment in me being a gamer where I became like a man in terms of gaming. It was this weird thing. But like, I remember getting Oblivion on it. So, I mean, you talked about Skyrim, but dude, Oblivion was what got me hooked. And I spent an entire summer playing that game and getting hooked. And just the 360 had so many games that I played on, so many memorable games. And I would be remiss if I didn't bring this up because some people gave me a hard time for not bringing this series up when we did our must play games. But Halo on the 360, man, holds so many memories for me, especially in youth group with my friends and things like
Which
that, and in
Halo?
college. So I'm going to talk about Halo Reach specifically because that's my favorite
Okay.
one. And
Really?
yeah, and I think the reason for that is because the story, just seeing what happened on Reach and being
Mhm.
able to live through that and experience it was just so cool to me. And being able to customize your Spartan with the different armor that you unlock throughout the game was really cool. I love seeing that. I love that depending on the helmet that you were wearing is the helmet you would see with the bullet hole in it in the beginning of the game. I didn't know that it changed that until I did it once. I was like, oh, that's really cool. There was
Yeah.
just, the story was cool. It was tragic. It was epic. It was awesome. It was so good. And then the multiplayer is just, it was just so good with Firefight and just the multiplayer modes. Blitzball. I mean, dude, I put so many hours into Halo Reach, but between just youth group LAN parties, and online multiplayer and online firefight stuff, getting to play with my family members and stuff. That's the game that holds a lot of special memories for me, and it's so good, man. Halo Reach is one of my, like I said, it's one of my favorite games. The Halo series as a whole is my favorites. I still go through the books every now and then because they release new ones now and again. But yeah, Halo Reach, man, just the 360 as a whole was just a solid system. I really do. I miss that system a lot.
Yeah.
I wish I still had one, but I don't. I wouldn't even have time. Like I say, I wish I had it. I wouldn't have time to play it if I had one because there's too many games to play now as is.
The level to which Microsoft nailed the network and online features in the 360
exactly.
was just like, it just crushed it the first time. Well, I wouldn't say the first time because they had Xbox Live for the original Xbox. But this is the first time they really we're doing this online stuff. And man, they just crushed it. It was just, the PS3 came out a year later and it had like a quarter of the online offerings just as far as like feature set. And oh my goodness, yeah, the 360 was revolutionary in a lot of ways.
I have to jump on that Reach train just for a second because
let's go, choo choo.
Reach does get a lot of credit for how amazing it is, but somehow it still feels like it doesn't get enough to me. Like, even though the stakes were brought down to a personal scale, I feel like in some ways the stakes are higher in Reach than in any other Halo game. At least it felt that way. But I remember distinctly, first of all, the story is incredible. I was so glad they got rid of dual wielding and brought it back to what Halo was. I love the new ability. I love like all that stuff. It was so well executed. And I remember distinctly the way that game ends. And if you haven't played Reach by now, sorry, I'm going to spoil it. When it confused me and I was like, what's going on? Because I'm like trying to kill these guys. And like they kept coming and there was no clear direction and the sad music was playing. And I was like, wait, what are they trying to do? And then I got the first crack in my helmet glass that stayed there. Yeah. And I was like, oh my word, I'm going to die. Like it hit me. And I was like,
last stand, dude.
And in that moment, dude, because we knew by then that was Bungie's last Halo game and they were gone. Like we knew that. And so like it was like we knew it was a swan song. So as soon as they did that, it was like the realization that my character was going to die, and what an incredible but tragic story twist that was. The realization that this is probably the last Halo that's going to be really Halo, at least, you know, I thought. And then like just remembering all the previous games, dude, I was like bawling for the rest of the end of that game. Like,
yeah, man.
It hit me so hard. I mean, it was, and then I like gritted my teeth and like killed as many elites as I could, even though I knew it wasn't going to matter. Technically, the game would end the same probably. I went crazy and I was like, I'm going to kill as many of these guys. Like it was just, Reach was a very special game.
It really was. Really was. Especially when you see part of your Spartan team getting killed off, man, like just throughout the latter parts of the game. I'm glad, though, I will say this. I'm glad my boy Emil, the one that had like the skull etched into his visor, I'm glad he went out like a boss just taking down these elites and stuff. Oh,
awesome. But like when that the girl that gets like sniped in the head without warning, and you're like,
yeah,
I didn't even get to say anything. Like, oh my word, it was just so
it's so sudden. Yeah, it's really jarring.
Yeah, very good game.
It's so good. But man, even with the 360 though, like, dude, how cool were the summer of arcades? Like in the summer, like there would be times where I would like anticipate the summer because I'm like, oh man, what are these cool indie games we're gonna get this summer? What are some cool games that we're gonna get? Like Microsoft knew how to get people pumped up for gaming as a whole, and the summer of arcade things were just so brilliant. Braid, that you mentioned earlier, Micah, that came out during a summer of arcade event, and like I remember playing that for weeks on end because it was so cool. But
well, man, Apple gets all the credit for like perfecting the online storefront, but like Microsoft pioneered a ton of that, like visibility, and like getting indies on board and supporting it, and like doing like a week by week, keeping people excited, or what was it, week by week or month by month? I forget.
I can't remember. I think it might have been month by month.
I think it was month by month probably. But like they pioneered a lot of how that fell together and a lot of those moving parts. Like they really nailed that.
Yeah. For sure. Man. Oh, so many good games. Not enough time because I think we might have gone over a little bit. But dear listeners, you guys let us know what your favorite consoles are, some of your favorite games as well, through all of the different ways that you can connect with us that we'll talk about here in a little bit. But before we let you all go, some recos. Micah, man, what should our dear listeners check out this week?
Well, I had I love recos, and I kind of was drawing a blank when it came to what I should be recommending. So I thought a little bit outside. I wanted to recommend something that technically hasn't even happened yet. It's not even something I've consumed, but I feel like there's a little bit. Maybe it's just me, but there's a little bit of this kind of like E3 is not going to be as good this year because Sony's not there, and just it's kind of sort of maybe dying off or whatever. And I'm here to say E3 2019 is gonna be hype.
Woo-woo.
And let me tell you why.
Here we go.
We're getting a new Xbox console shown off at this E3. If that's not enough, we're getting a new Switch console going to be shown off at this E3. Now, we may have something a little, maybe like not exactly E3, maybe a little bit before a little bit. We're getting new versions of the Switch this year, and we're getting a new Xbox shown off to us. So that's first and foremost. The next thing, so Sony's not here. They vacated their primetime Monday night spot. And so that leaves a big gaping hole in the press conference lineup. So guess who takes their slot? Good old Square Enix. And why would Square Enix take such a prime real estate spot unless they had something to show off? Enter Crystal Dynamics' Avengers game and Final Fantasy VII Remake. They're both going to be at E3 2019. Get ready for it. Get hyped. They're coming. Kingdom Hearts 3 is out of the way. It's Final Fantasy VII Remake time. They're going to show it. They're going to show the Avengers. Move over to Nintendo. We are now in the longest period ever between the release of a mainline 3D Zelda game and the announcement of the next mainline 3D Zelda game. So we're going to get the 3D Zelda game at this E3 probably. We're going to get Halo Infinite at this E3. We're going to see what Halo Infinite is, most likely. We're going to get a piece of that. We're going to get Metroid Prime Trilogy is going to drop sometime this fall. Late summer, early fall. It's happening.
My attention now.
We're getting Animal Crossing. It's completely detailed at this E3. It's coming out. So they're going to go into Animal Crossing. If you think E3 2019 is going to be a slouch because Sony's not going to be there, change your mind. This is going to be one of the best E3s in recent memory.
Well, Micah, I gotta say, I liked you just fine up until now, but now I really hate you because now I have to wait a whole month and you hyped me up. I was like super like middling on this E3, like it's gonna be fine, whatever. And now you got me all hyped up. Oh my word!
Here's another thing: Cyberpunk 2077. We're gonna get to see more Cyberpunk. We're going to get to see, it's going to be ridiculous. And Sony probably will still do something around E3. Just
they'll do a Sony Direct kind of thing.
I was going to say, they already did a little test flight, which was actually pretty awful, of their little Sony Direct, they call it. I bet cash money they conveniently dropped one of those during the E3.
A little bit before, a little bit after,
Dude, I forgot about a lot of those games. I will say, though, I can't be sure, but I want to say I did read an article fairly recently where Nintendo flat out said we will not be announcing any new hardware at E3.
Yeah, and I don't mean it's going to be like a Switch 2. I think we're going to see the Switch Lite.
That's still new hardware, though, isn't it? I mean,
I guess it depends on what the upgrades are.
They may have used very careful phrasing and like no like new iteration. I don't know what, but so it might still happen. I would love to see a Switch Lite, but
there's too many rumors swirling about for Nintendo not to have something to show off. I feel like
I'd love to see it. It'd be awesome. Man, I'm gonna have to make another one of my trailers.
Oh, dude, yeah. Forgot about that.
I didn't make one last year because I couldn't get hyped for anything of last year's E3 just about. I was like, there's not enough here to like go off of. So I didn't make it.
Now, even if just, let's say, only 75% of what I just said comes to pass. That's still
That
a
is,
hype
dude.
E3. It's gonna
I
be
forgot about Avengers. Oh my word.
been it's been like
It has
years
been,
since they
yeah.
announced that thing. They gotta have something to
That's
show.
crazy.
I mean,
Well,
if
damn.
all they gotta do is just announce Metroid Prime Trilogy and Animal Crossing for the Switch, and it's like game over. Hype train is just
Dude,
it's in outer space.
Metroid
I think you'll be
freaking Prime trilogy. Like, where is that game? I want it so bad. Ah,
It exists.
I need it in
out
my
there.
life.
It's
Oh.
I think they played it or something. I'm
Need
just
it in my
kidding.
life.
You have
Jonathan,
to
before
stop
we get too off topic, because I can get hyped about Animal Crossing again very easily. What are some of your recos, man?
So I got a couple. Game recommendation, Baba Is You, like I talked about earlier. All I would say is if you're not a huge puzzle game fan or you don't like things that are like challenging to figure out, you probably won't like this game because it's very, very difficult very early on. Like a few levels are like, okay, here's how it works, and then they just like throw you into the sharks. Like it's crazy. And then so I would say like if you do love puzzle games and you want a really great challenge in a very well designed game, Baba Is You is a very affordable, really polished, fun game. And then the book I mentioned, The Way of Kings, which is the first book in the Stormlight Archive by Brandon Sanderson. If you're looking for some new fantasy that is different from anything you've read before and extremely engaging and very fascinating, I would recommend the audiobook of The Way of Kings. That's pretty much it for me.
Right on. My two recos then are going to be the documentary American Gospel. I actually finally managed to finish that this past week, and it's really good. It's really good at just kind of talking about what the gospel is, and then breaking down what the gospel isn't by looking at the health, wealth, and prosperity gospel that is so prevalent in our culture, and it's going overseas now and becoming big over there, and it's leading people astray in a really bad way. So it's a really good documentary. You can watch the first hour of it, I think, on their Facebook page or YouTube, one of the two. So check that out, watch it, share it with your friends. And then the other thing I want to recommend that you watch is Avengers Endgame, which is so good. So good. So good. And if by for some reason you've been like under a rock and not watched any of these movies in the past like 11 years that they've been around, first of all, get your act together and then go on to iTunes and rent them or PlayStation or whatever. Just because Avengers Endgame is seriously, it's a cool movie. It's one of those things where like you're not going to go in and be like, oh, this is high art. This is just amazing. No, it's something that like closes the book over the last 11 years of the stories that they've been building up, and I think they did a remarkable job in doing so. So good, but don't spoil the movie.
The sheer number of ways they could have possibly horribly screwed up Endgame is incalculable. I mean, this could have been done badly. I was so terrified going in, and I'm not going to say anything, any kind of spoilers, I promise. But like, I personally think they absolutely nailed it. I would not ask for anything to change. I mean, there may be a couple minor gripes I've heard online here and there that are like, well, I guess maybe, but like they brought it home. I mean, it is
That's all I've heard is just and I've seen it. Is just
yeah,
minor gripes. That's all anyone can toss at it.
just
You know, unless you're just completely just not a fan of the genre, which you know is
Sure.
not the film for you anyway. This is I haven't seen all the Marvel movies, but I've seen most of them.
Yeah.
This is my favorite one.
Yeah.
Straight up.
It is very.
I cried like
very good.
different times.
For different reasons, have no idea,
like
Jonathan.
oh.
At one point in time, I'm borderline shaking. I'm trying to compose myself. So hard. It was incredible.
What a masterpiece of a decade of movies. Oh my word.
So good. So good, man.
What I feel alive.
So good. It's funny that you say that like the number that the ways they could have screwed this up is incalculable, but I think Doctor Strange managed to number that in the last movie.
14 million ways they can screw this up.
And this is the one we got, which is so good. But anyway, Jonathan, Micah, guys, thank you for coming on the show. filling out the seats here, talking some of the games that we really enjoy. I always enjoy having you guys on. Dear listeners, if you want to interact with us or if you want to support what we do here at the show, head over to patreon.com/thereformedgamers to consider lending your support. Support as low as $1 a month goes a long way in helping us keeping doing what we're doing here, and it gets you sweet perks like early uncut access to all of our episodes, so you can hear us goof around with the soundboard for 15 minutes, which is always fun. And then you also get access to our Discord server, our behind the scenes episodes, just a lot of different things. Go check it out, patreon.com/thereformedgamers. Also head over to youtube.com/thereformedgamers, twitch.tv/thereformedgamers for streams, videos, let's plays, all that fun stuff. And then check our website out, thereformedgamers.com, for articles, show notes, and more. And if you want to connect with us, go over to Twitter at TRG Podcast, like our Facebook page, join the Facebook group, and follow us on Instagram, TRG Podcast, on all of them. I think there will be links in your show notes, so you won't stumble across some random website. But yeah, follow us on there, connect with us. Love you guys 3000, and until next time, GG and amen.
Thank you for listening to this episode of The Reformed Gamers. The following people are supporting us on Patreon at the producer level or higher, and we'd like to shout them out right here, right now. Those people are Alex Castellanos, David Matthews, David Skinner, Eric Bryant, Gareth Evans, Luke Strain, the Jet Islander Podcast, and Wesley Ray. Thank you for your support, keeping the controllers charged, and encouraging my addictive habit of getting platinum trophies. GG and amen.